My mother didn't clap when I graduated summa cum laude. Instead, she sat there tapping on a calculator, tallying the exact price of my existence. My graduation gift wasn't a hug, but a spiral-bound ledger titled Rearing Expenses. With a shark-like smile, she informed me that interest would begin accruing at 8 in the morning. I had two choices: pay her rent for the rest of my life or evict her from my kingdom. The announcer bellowed my name, Leilani Starling, and the auditorium erupted into the polite, thunderous applause that accompanies a summa cum laude distinction. I walked across the stage, the heavy velvet of my gown sweeping against my ankles, the mortarboard tight against my forehead. The lights were blinding, white and searing. But I knew exactly where to look. I had memorized the seat number days ago. Row 4, seat 12. I turned my head, smiling a smile that I had practiced in the mirror for a week, a smile that begged for validation. Patricia was not looking at me. My mother was not clapping. She was not wiping away a tear of maternal pride. Her head was bowed, the blue light of her smartphone illuminating her sharp, surgically preserved cheekbones. She was checking the midday stock performance of her portfolio. I saw her thumb swipe down to refresh the screen just as the dean placed the diploma in my hand. I froze for a fraction of a second, the handshake lingering too long, before I forced my legs to carry me down the stairs. That was the moment the illusion began to fracture. Though I was too desperate for her love to let it break completely. Not yet. We live in Seattle, perched high on the slopes of Queen Anne, in a neighborhood where the houses have names and the driveways are heated to melt the rare snow. The Starling residence is a Victorian masterpiece, a sprawling structure of dark wood and wraparound porches that tourists often stop to photograph. From the outside, it is the architectural embodiment of the American dream, a fortress of old money and stability. The hydrangeas are always blue, the lawn is manicured to the millimeter, and the paint is a tasteful shade of slate gray that suggests dignity. But inside, the air is always 3 degrees too cold. It is a house that demands you wipe your feet until the soles of your shoes are raw. It is a house where laughter dies in the high ceilings, suffocated by the heavy drapes. We went to dinner at a steakhouse overlooking the Sound, the kind of place where the menu has no prices and the waiters wear tuxedos. I sat across from Patricia, who was sipping a martini with the precise, mechanical movements of a metronome. Beside me sat Jared, my 20-year-old brother, who had worn a hoodie to a 5-star restaurant because he claimed dress codes were a tool of systemic oppression. Despite the fact that his hoodie cost $600, Jared had dropped out of college 3 months into his freshman year to become a streamer. He spent his days screaming at video games in his soundproofed bedroom, a room my mother had paid $40,000 to renovate for him. The dinner was an exercise in silence. I tried to talk about my thesis, about the job offer I had secured at Novus Tech, about the future. Patricia just nodded, her eyes drifting over my shoulder to inspect the other diners, assessing their net worth by the cut of their suits. When the bill came, the waiter placed the leather folder in the center of the table. Patricia did not reach for it. She finished the last olive in her glass, dabbed her lips with a linen napkin, and stared at me. "You should get that," she said, her voice smooth and devoid of inflection. I blinked, my hand freezing halfway to my water glass. "What do you mean, you are a college graduate now? Leilani, you have a full-time job starting Monday. It is time you started pulling your weight. Treat your brother and me. It is the least you can do to thank us for enduring that long." Boring ceremony. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck. I had exactly $400 in my bank account. The sign-on bonus from Novus Tech would not clear for another 2 weeks. But the waiter was watching, and the people at the next table were glancing over. I pulled out my debit card, my hand trembling slightly. The bill was $380. I paid it. I tipped 10%, praying the waiter would not curse me, leaving myself with practically zero balance. Jared laughed, a wet snorting sound. "Thanks, sis. Next time, order the Wagyu. It is way better." The drive home was silent. When we pulled into the driveway, the rain had started, a classic Seattle drizzle that made the world look like it was melting. I reached for the door handle, eager to retreat to my room and collapse. But Patricia's voice stopped me. "Meet me in my office in 10 minutes," she said. "We have paperwork to discuss." I assumed it was about the car insurance or perhaps transferring the title of the old sedan I drove. I went upstairs, changed out of my graduation dress into sweatpants, and walked down the hall to the master wing. The door to her office was open. Patricia was sitting behind her mahogany desk. The room smelled of lavender and ink. She did not look like a mother welcoming her daughter. She looked like a CEO preparing to acquire a failing subsidiary. She gestured to the stiff-backed chair opposite her. "Sit," she commanded. I sat. On the desk, centered on the green leather blotter, was a thick document. It was spiral-bound, with a clear plastic cover. The title page read, in bold, capitalized letters, Rearing Expenses and Capital Recovery Schedule. Beneficiary, Leilani Starling. I frowned, reaching out to touch it. "What is this?" "Open it," she said. I flipped the cover. The first page was a spreadsheet. It was dizzying, row after row of dates and numbers. October 14th, 2003, diapers and formula, $42.15. November 2nd, 2003, pediatrician copay, $30. January 2008, ballet lessons, $150. My eyes widened as I flipped through the pages. It went on and on. Clothes, school lunches, the cost of the field trip to the zoo in the 3rd grade, the braces I wore in middle school, the prom dress. Even the gas money for driving me to soccer practice was calculated based on mileage and the average fuel price of that year. It was a receipt for my entire life. I looked at the final page. The number was bolded and circled in red ink. $250,412.63. "Mom," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Is this a joke? Do I look like I'm joking?" Patricia clasped her hands on the desk. She looked calm, almost serene. "This is the capital I have invested in you over the last 22 years. Now that you have graduated and secured employment, the investment period is over. It is time for the repayment phase to begin." I stared at her, unable to process the words. "You are charging me for raising me. You are my mother. That is what parents do. That is a very naive way of looking at the world." "Leilani," she replied, opening a drawer and pulling out a calculator. "I sacrificed my youth for you. I sacrificed my career opportunities. I invested money in you that could have been compounding in the S&P 500. You are an asset, Leilani, and like any asset, you are expected to yield a return. If I had bought a rental property 22 years ago, it would be paying me passive income by now. You are that property." She tapped a few buttons on the calculator. "Here are the terms," she said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a contract. "Starting tomorrow, you will pay rent for your room. The market rate for a room in a historic home in Queen Anne is high, but I will give you the family discount. $3,000 a month." "$3,000, I choked out. "My room is the smallest one in the house. It used to be a sewing room. It has a view of the garden." She countered without missing a beat. "Plus, utilities and internet are included. Furthermore, to address the principal debt of $250,000, you will remit 20% of your gross monthly salary to me directly. We will structure it as a garnish on your wages if you cannot be trusted to transfer it manually." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "This is insane. You cannot do this. I am your daughter, not your employee. Sit down." Her voice cracked like a whip. I did not sit. I felt tears pricking my eyes, hot and angry. "I thought you were proud of me. I thought this dinner was to celebrate my hard work. But I am just a portfolio to you. Fair is fair. Leilani, I have carried you for 2 decades. It is time you carried me. That is fairness. That is justice." Just then, the door pushed open. Jared walked in, smirking. He was spinning a set of keys on his finger, a key fob with a distinct logo, a BMW logo. "Hey, Mom," he said, ignoring my distress completely. "The new X5 is sick. I just took it for a spin around the block. The sound system is insane. Thanks again." I froze. I looked from the keys in Jared's hand to the ledger on the desk. "You bought him a car?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A $60,000 car. He needs reliable transportation for his brand," Patricia said, her tone softening instantly as she looked at her son. "Appearance is everything in his industry. He dropped out of college," I screamed, finally losing control. "He sits in his room playing games all day. And you buy him a luxury car while you hand me a bill for diaper money." Jared laughed again, leaning against the doorframe. "Sucks to suck. Lay. Maybe if you were more entertaining, you would get perks too. But you are just boring. You are the worker bee. Worker bees make honey for the queen. That is just biology." He tossed the keys in the air and caught them, then sauntered out, whistling. I looked back at my mother. The softness was gone from her face. She was the shark again. "I am not signing this," I said, pushing the contract away. "I am moving out. I will go stay with a friend. I will sleep in my car. I do not care. I am not paying you a dime." I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest, my hand reaching for the doorknob. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Patricia said. Her voice was quiet, deadly. I stopped. "Why?" "Because," she said, picking up her phone and tapping the screen idly, "I know the VP of Human Resources at Novus Tech. We play bridge together on Thursdays. If you walk out that door without signing this agreement, I will make a phone call. I will tell her about your history of instability. I will tell her about the theft." What theft? I turned around, horrified. "I have never stolen anything. It does not matter what is true. Leilani, it matters what is on the record. An investigation alone would be enough to have your offer rescinded before your first day. And who are they going to believe, a 22-year-old nobody, or Patricia Starling, a pillar of the community?" She stood up and walked around the desk, stopping just inches from me. She smelled of expensive perfume and rot. "And besides," she whispered, leaning into my ear, "you cannot rent an apartment. You cannot open a utility account. You cannot even get a library card." Why? I breathed. "Because, my sweet girl, I have your birth certificate. I have your social security card. I have your passport. They are all locked in my safe, and you will never guess the combination. Without those, you do not exist. You are a ghost." She pulled back, smiling that shark smile, the one that showed too many teeth. "So, sit down, sign the paper. Interest starts accruing at 8 in the morning." I looked at the pen she was holding out to me. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and black. I looked at the door, which suddenly felt 100 miles away. I realized then that the diploma in my room, the honors, the hard work, none of it meant freedom. I was not a daughter. I was a bond that had reached maturity, and the bondholder had come to collect. My hand shook as I took the pen. The ink was black as night. I signed my name, Leilani Starling, and with every stroke, I felt a piece of my soul wither. But deep down, beneath the fear and the shock, something else was sparking, a tiny, cold flame. "You want a return on your investment, Mother," I thought, as I watched her tuck the signed contract into a folder with a satisfied hum. "I will give you a return. I will give you exactly what you deserve." My father was a blur of warm flannel and the smell of sawdust, a memory that grew fainter with every passing year. He died when I was 12, a sudden heart attack that left a void in the house that no amount of expensive furniture could fill. I remember people whispering at the funeral, hushed conversations about how Arthur had been a prudent man, how he had set things up so his girls would never have to worry. They spoke of life insurance policies and protected assets. But the day after the funeral, Patricia had locked herself in his study for 6 hours. When she emerged, her eyes were dry and her jaw was set. She told me there were complications. She told me the market had taken a downturn. She told me we had to tighten our belts. I never saw a will. I never saw a single bank statement. I just saw the sudden influx of designer handbags in her closet and assumed that was how grief manifested for her. 10 years later, I was starting to understand that grief had nothing to do with it. My first week at Novus Tech was a blur of onboarding seminars and imposter syndrome. I was an associate product manager, a role that came with a shiny badge, a laptop that cost more than my first car, and a salary that should have been my ticket to freedom. On the 15th of the month, my first paycheck hit my account. It was a glorious number, enough to make me feel lightheaded. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. A transfer had been initiated. Not by me. I logged in, my fingers trembling. The balance was gone, all of it, save for $200. I called Patricia from the bathroom stall at work, whispering so my colleagues wouldn't hear the panic in my voice. "Mom, what happened to my money?" I asked. "I moved it to the repayment account." "Leilani," she said, her voice sounding bored. "We discussed this. I am managing your finances until the debt is cleared. You have $200 for lunch and gas. That is plenty. If you need more, you can submit a written request for an allowance." Allowance. The word tasted like ash. I was 22 years old, working for a Fortune 500 company, and I was on an allowance. But the money was just the beginning. The real suffocation came from the digital leash she snapped around my neck. That evening, she demanded my phone. She installed a family tracking app, the kind parents use for rebellious teenagers. "It is for your safety," she said as she typed in a passcode I wasn't allowed to know. "The city is dangerous at night. I need to know where my investment is at all times. If I was 5 minutes late coming home from work, my phone would explode with texts. Where are you? Why is the dot on the map stationary? Are you wasting gas?" The curfew was set for 10 o'clock on weeknights and 11 on weekends. I was a prisoner who was allowed work release, nothing more. The humiliation reached its peak in my third week. I had a presentation with the regional directors. It was my chance to prove that the fresh graduate wasn't just a diversity hire. I needed a suit. My wardrobe consisted of worn-out jeans and hoodies from college. I needed something sharp, something that said I belonged in the boardroom. I drafted a request for $300. I itemized the cost: a blazer, trousers, and a modest pair of heels. I placed the request on her desk. She denied it without looking up from her iPad. Denied, I asked, feeling my stomach drop. "Mom, I have a presentation. I can't wear a sweatshirt. You have plenty of clothes in the attic," she said. "I saved all my work clothes from the 90s. High quality, Italian wool. You can wear those." "Mom, those are 30 years old. They won't fit. The style is completely different. Fashion is cyclical." "Leilani, stop being so vain. We are in a repayment phase. Spending capital on new textiles, when we have perfectly good inventory, is bad business," I argued. I pleaded. I cried. She didn't budge. The next morning, I walked into Novus Tech wearing a charcoal gray suit that smelled faintly of mothballs and cedar. The shoulder pads were massive, making me look like a linebacker in drag. The trousers were pleated and billowed around my hips, tapering to a tight cuff at the ankle. It was hideous. It was a costume. When I walked into the conference room, the conversation stopped. My boss, a woman named Sarah, who wore tailored silk and sharp blazers, looked me up and down. She didn't say anything mean. She didn't have to. Her eyes did a quick flicker of pity, and then she looked away. "Nice vintage look, Leilani," a male colleague named Brad whispered as I sat down, going for that talking heads vibe. The table erupted in stifled giggles. I sat there, my face burning, feeling the oversized shoulder pads pressing against my ears like blinders. I delivered my presentation. The data was perfect. My analysis was sound. But nobody was listening to the numbers. They were staring at the girl playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. I had never felt so small. I went home that night and collapsed onto my bed, too exhausted to even take off the suit. I wanted to sleep for a week, but sleep was not on the agenda. Around midnight, the bass started. It thumped through the floorboards, a rhythmic pounding that rattled the picture frames on my wall. "Jared." I went out into the hallway. The smell of weed and cheap beer hit me instantly. There were strangers in our house, people I didn't know, spilling drinks on the hardwood floors. Jared was in the living room, standing on the coffee table, holding a bottle of vodka and screaming lyrics to a rap song. I found Patricia in the kitchen, calmly making herbal tea while a girl with glitter on her face vomited in the sink. "Mom, you have to stop this," I said, my voice hoarse. "I have work for 6 hours. I can't sleep. Let him live a little." "Leilani," she said, stepping around the girl. "He had a hard week. His subscriber count dropped. He needs to blow off steam. He is waking up the whole neighborhood, and he is destroying the living room. He is networking." She corrected me. "Influencers need to be seen. You are just jealous because he has a social life and you do not. You are being incredibly selfish. The world does not revolve around your little office job." Selfish. The word was a slap. I went back to my room, put in earplugs, and cried until the sun came up. A few days later, there was a mixer at work. A legal compliance seminar that turned into happy hour. I found myself standing next to one of the in-house counsels. A man named Mr. Henderson. He had kind eyes and a grandfatherly demeanor. I took a sip of my lukewarm water and decided to take a risk. "Mr. Henderson," I started, trying to keep my voice casual. "I have a hypothetical question." "About inheritance law." "Oh," he raised an eyebrow. "Planning your estate early." "Smart kid. No, not me. A friend. If someone's father died when they were a minor, and there was a will, does the surviving parent have the legal right to hide it forever, Mr.?" Henderson frowned. He set his drink down. "Well, that depends on the state and the specific trust structures. But generally, no. Once the beneficiary turns of age, usually 18 or 21, the executor has a fiduciary duty to disclose the assets. Hiding a will is a felony. It is fraud." "Why do you ask?" I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. "Just curious. My friend loves legal dramas." I couldn't say more, but the seed was planted. Fiduciary duty, fraud, words that had weight. The next day, the nightmare followed me to my sanctuary. I was sitting at my desk, typing out a report, when I heard a familiar voice. Oh, there she is, my hardworking girl. I froze. I looked up to see Patricia walking through the open plan office of Novus Tech. She was wearing a pastel cardigan and holding a basket wrapped in cellophane. She looked harmless. She looked like the mother of the year. Sarah, my boss, was walking with her, Leilani. "Look who surprised you," Sarah said, smiling. "Your mother brought lunch for the team. Isn't that sweet?" Patricia beamed. "I just wanted to see where my daughter spends all her time. And I know how much she loves my homemade lasagna." It was a lie. Patricia hadn't cooked a meal since 1998. The lasagna was from the expensive Italian deli down the street. She had just transferred it to a Tupperware. She sat on the edge of my desk, commanding the space. She charmed everyone. She laughed at Brad's bad jokes. She complimented Sarah's shoes. But then, as the team drifted back to their desks, she leaned in close to me. "So, this is it," she whispered, scanning the room. "Not exactly a corner office. Is it, Mom? Why are you here?" I hissed. "I need to know if the 20% I'm getting is accurate," she murmured, her smile never wavering for the onlookers. "I have a feeling you might be getting a performance bonus soon. Or maybe a cost of living adjustment. I want to make sure you don't forget to report it. Inflation is up. Leilani, my expenses are rising." She wasn't a mother bringing lunch. She was an auditor performing a site visit. She left 10 minutes later, leaving me with a cold lasagna and a burning sense of violation. She had breached the one place where I was Leilani the professional, not Leilani the debtor, the breaking point. However, came in the mail. I had come home early one Tuesday, beating Patricia to the mailbox. Usually, she intercepted everything, but today, the mailman was late. I grabbed the stack of envelopes and flipped through them. Bills, flyers, and a letter from a major credit card company, addressed to me. But I hadn't applied for a credit card. I tore it open. It wasn't an offer. It was a statement. A statement for a card ending in 4092. The balance was $6,000. The transactions were recent: a spa weekend, a set of new tires for a BMW, a vintage wine subscription. My hands shook. She had opened a card in my name. She had forged my signature. She was destroying my credit score to fund her lifestyle and Jared's car maintenance. I heard the garage door opening. Patricia was home. I panicked. I couldn't confront her yet. I knew what she would say. She would say she was building my credit history. She would say I owed it to her. She would gaslight me until I believed that identity theft was a form of parenting. I needed to hide. I needed to think. I ran to the only place in the house where Patricia never went because it was dusty and Jared never went because there was no Wi-Fi: the basement. I scurried down the wooden stairs, the air growing cool and damp. The basement was filled with the detritus of our past: old holiday decorations, broken furniture, boxes of Jared's discarded toys. I sat on an old crate, clutching the credit card statement, trying to slow my breathing. I looked around the dim room, illuminated only by a single bare bulb. My eyes landed on a shelf in the corner, hidden behind a stack of old tires. There was a wooden box there, dark oak, with brass hinges. It looked out of place among the cardboard and plastic. I walked over and pulled it down. A layer of dust coated the lid. I wiped it away with my sleeve. Burnt into the wood were the initials A.S., Arthur Starling, my father. I had never seen this box before. Patricia had cleared out his study the week after he died. She said she had donated everything. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to lift the lid, but it was locked. I shook it. Something heavy shifted inside. I looked around for a tool, anything to pry it open. I found a rusted screwdriver on a workbench nearby. I jammed it into the gap between the lid and the box. I knew I was desecrating something, but I didn't care. I pushed. The wood groaned, with a sharp crack. The latch gave way. I opened the lid. Inside, there were no papers, no money, just a few personal items: a watch I remembered him wearing, a photo of me and him at the beach, one I had never seen, and at the bottom, taped to the velvet lining, was a key. It was a small, silver key, not a house key. It looked like a safety deposit box key. It had a number stamped on it, 402, and a name engraved in tiny letters, First National. I stared at the key. Why was this here? Why had Patricia hidden it in the basement instead of destroying it? Suddenly, the floorboards above me creaked. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Leilani Patricia's voice drifted down the stairs. "Are you down there?" I slammed the box shut and shoved the key into my bra. "I'm just looking for some old books." "Mom!" I yelled back, my voice cracking. "Well, hurry up," she called out. "Jared needs help setting up his green screen. And don't forget, rent is due tomorrow." I looked at the box one last time, then shoved it back behind the tires. I touched the cold metal of the key against my skin. It felt like a heartbeat. I didn't know what it opened, but for the first time since graduation, I felt something other than fear. I felt like I had a weapon. The silver key sat in my bra, pressed against my skin like a radioactive isotope. For 3 days, it was the only thing keeping me upright. I could feel its jagged teeth every time I breathed. A constant, sharp reminder that there was a version of the truth Patricia had locked away. I spent my lunch breaks at Novus Tech scouring the internet, looking for the branch code stamped on the metal, First National Bank. It was an old institution, the kind with marble floors and brass tellers, located downtown in a building that had survived 3 earthquakes. It was the bank my father had used. While I was planning my excursion, the atmosphere at home shifted from cold to suffocating. On Tuesday morning, I found a new memo on my pillow. Patricia did not believe in face-to-face conversations when a passive-aggressive note could suffice. Due to the rising cost of utilities and the unprecedented inflation affecting the global market, the memo read, "The base rent for your room has been adjusted. Effective immediately. The monthly payment is $4,000. $4,000. I stormed down to the kitchen. Patricia was drinking a green smoothie that cost more than my hourly wage. $4,000, I asked, my voice trembling with exhaustion. "Mom, That is more than my entire paycheck after taxes and your 20% garnish. I literally cannot pay that." She didn't even look up from her tablet. "Then you will have to work harder. Leilani, pick up overtime, do some consulting on the side, drive for a rideshare app on weekends. The market is the market. I cannot subsidize your lifestyle just because you are lazy. I am not lazy. I work 60 hours a week, then work 80. She snapped. "Do you think I slept when I was your age? I was building an empire. If you cannot afford the rent, there are homeless shelters downtown. Although, without your ID, I imagine the intake process would be difficult." She smiled then. It was a terrifyingly calm expression. She knew she had me. She held my identity hostage, so she could squeeze every cent out of my labor until I was dry. I started taking the late shifts at Novus Tech. I volunteered for the projects nobody wanted. I stopped eating lunch to save money. I became a ghost in my own life, fueled by caffeine and a burning, white-hot hatred. Then came the crash. It was a Thursday night. I had just walked through the door, my eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets for 12 hours, when I heard screaming. Jared was in the living room, pacing back and forth, holding an ice pack to his forehead. Patricia was on the phone, her voice shrill. "My baby is traumatized," she yelled into the receiver. Your client stopped abruptly. "This is a setup." I looked at Jared. He wasn't traumatized. He looked annoyed. "What happened?" I asked. "Some idiot stopped at a red light." Jared grunted, taking a hit from his vape pen. I looked down for 1 second to check my stream chat, and boom, the X5 is totaled. Lay, the front bumper is in the back seat. He had rear-ended someone while live streaming. Patricia hung up the phone and whirled on me. Her eyes were wild. "We have a problem," she said. "The insurance deductible is high because Jared is under 25, and the other driver is threatening to sue for whiplash. We need cash to settle this quietly before the police file a report that could hurt Jared's brand image." She held out her hand. "Give me your savings." I stepped back. "What? No. I have $4,000 saved. That is everything I have. That is my escape fund. It is family money." She corrected me. "Jared needs it. If this goes on his record, his insurance premiums will skyrocket. That is his problem." He was texting and driving. Patricia's face hardened. She took a step closer. "Invading my personal space. If you do not transfer that money to me in the next 5 minutes, Leilani, you can pack your bags. And remember, you leave without your birth certificate, without your passport, and with a negative reference that I will personally deliver to your boss tomorrow morning. Do you want to be homeless and unemployed, or do you want to help your brother?" I looked at Jared. He wasn't even watching us. He was typing on his phone, probably tweeting about his near-death experience to get sympathy donations. I felt something break inside me. Not a bone, but a tether. The last strand of hope that she might actually love me snapped. "Okay," I said softly. What? Patricia blinked. Surprised by my sudden surrender, I said, "Okay, I will transfer it. Just please don't kick me out." I pulled out my phone. I transferred every cent I had saved. $4,212. Gone. Patricia checked her notification. "Good girl," she said, patting my cheek. "I knew you would do the right thing." She turned back to Jared to comfort him about his lost bumper. I walked upstairs to my room, closed the door, and sank to the floor. But I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. I reached into my bra and touched the key. She had taken my money. She had taken my time. She had taken my name, but she didn't know about the box. The next morning, I told Sarah I had a migraine and needed a half day. It was the first time I had ever called in sick. I put on my oversized, mothball-scented suit, the only formal wear I had, and took a bus downtown. First National Bank was exactly as I imagined. High ceilings, hushed whispers, the smell of old money and floor wax. I walked up to the front desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Can I help you?" Miss the receptionist asked, eyeing my ill-fitting suit with skepticism. "I have a key," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "For a safety deposit box. My father, Arthur Starling." The receptionist paused. She typed the name into her computer. Her eyes widened slightly. "One moment, please." She picked up a landline phone and whispered something. A minute later, an older man in a three-piece suit walked out from the back offices. He had silver hair and the kind of posture that suggested he had spent 50 years carrying other people's secrets. "Miss Starling?" he asked, extending a hand. "I am Mr. Abernathy. I was your father's account manager. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask for verification." He looked at my face and saw Arthur. "We have been wondering when you would come," he said softly. He led me into the vault. It was a massive room lined with steel boxes. The air was cool and still. He stopped in front of box number 402. "Your father left strict instructions." "Mr. Abernathy said as he inserted his master key into the lock. "No one was to access this but you. Not even your mother. Especially not your mother. He was very clear about that." He turned his key. I inserted mine. With a heavy click, the lock disengaged. Mr. Abernathy pulled the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. "Take your time," he said, closing the door behind him. I sat alone at the wooden table. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely lift the lid. Inside, there was a stack of documents bound in a blue legal folder. On top was a letter in handwriting I hadn't seen in 10 years. "My dearest Leilani," it began. I skipped the sentimental part. I couldn't handle the love right now. I needed the facts. I flipped to the legal documents. The first was a last will and testament. Not just my father's, but my grandmother's, Arthur's mother. I read the clauses. I read them again. Then a third time. Upon her death, the property located at 1412 Queen Anne Avenue North shall be held in trust for her granddaughter, Leilani Starling, until she reaches the age of 21. At that time, full legal title and ownership shall transfer solely to Leilani Starling. I gasped. The air sucked out of my lungs. The house, the Victorian mansion, the garden. It wasn't Patricia's. It had never been Patricia's. It was my grandmother's house, and now it was mine. I checked the date. I had turned 21 over a year ago. I kept reading. There was a section on guardianship. Patricia was named as the trustee, with a fiduciary duty to maintain the asset and transfer the title upon my 21st birthday. She hadn't just forgotten. She had suppressed the will. She was living in my house, charging me rent to live in a sewing room that I legally owned. But there was more. The second document was an insurance policy payout record. Arthur Starling had a life insurance policy worth $1 million. The beneficiary was the Leilani Starling Education and Maintenance Trust. I flipped through the bank statements attached to the trust. Withdrawal, $50,000. Reason home renovation. Withdrawal, $80,000. Reason vehicle purchase. Withdrawal, $20,000. Reason vacation. The dates coincided perfectly with the years Patricia had stopped working. The years she had bought her designer wardrobe. The years she had renovated Jared's room. She had drained it. She had drained my college fund, my safety net, my inheritance. She had spent every dime of my father's legacy on herself and her golden boy son. And then, when the well ran dry, she had turned me into her new revenue stream. The realization didn't make me scream. It made me cold. Ice cold. The trembling in my hands stopped. I looked at the total remaining balance in the trust. $0.00. I stood up. I walked over to the copy machine in the corner of the room. Mr. Abernathy had told me I could use it. I copied everything. The will, the deed, the trust ledgers showing the embezzlement. I made 2 copies. One set I put in my bag. The other set I put back in the box. I walked out of the viewing room. Mr. Abernathy was waiting. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded different, deeper, older. "Mr. Abernathy, does the bank have a record of who authorized those withdrawals from the trust?" He nodded solemnly. "We do. Patricia Starling. As trustee, we flagged several of them as unusual, but she provided receipts for expenses related to your care. Fake receipts," I said. He looked at me over his glasses. "If you wish to contest the accounting, Miss Starling, our fraud department would be very interested in speaking with you. Not yet, I said. I need to get my ducks in a row, but keep the originals safe. I will guard them with my life. He promised. I walked out of the bank and into the bright Seattle afternoon. The rain had stopped. The city looked sharp and clear. I took the bus back to Queen Anne. I didn't go back to work. I went home. I needed to see my kingdom. I needed to see the usurper sitting on my throne. When I unlocked the front door, I expected silence. It was 2 p.m. Patricia should have been napping or at the spa. Instead, I heard voices in the living room. Jovial, excited voices. It has excellent bones, Patricia was saying, and the location is unbeatable. We are looking for a quick sale. Cash only. I froze in the hallway. I crept closer, peering through the crack in the double doors. Patricia was sitting on the sofa. Opposite her was a man in a cheap suit, a real estate agent I recognized from bus bench ads, and a couple who looked eager. Jared was there too, sitting on the arm of the sofa, looking more animated than I had seen him in years. So, if we sell this week, Jared was saying, we can have the liquidity by the first, absolutely. The agent said, the market is hot. If you price it at $2.5 million for a quick sale, it will be gone in 48 hours. $2.5 million? The house was worth $4 million. She was underselling it for quick cash. But why? Then Patricia spoke. And my blood turned to slush. Perfect. My son has a very time-sensitive investment opportunity in a new cryptocurrency startup. We need the capital immediately to secure his position as a founding partner. We are ready to sign the listing agreement today. She was selling my house, my inheritance, the roof over my head. She was selling it to gamble $2.5 million on a crypto scam for Jared. She was going to liquidate my entire future and leave me homeless, all to feed the bottomless pit of her son's incompetence. The agent pushed a contract across the coffee table. Just sign here, Mrs. Starling, as the sole owner. Patricia picked up her pen. I stood in the shadows, clutching the copy of the deed in my bag. A scream rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. If I stormed in there now, I would just be the hysterical daughter. She would lie. She would say I was crazy. She still had my ID. She still had the power. No, I couldn't stop her with a tantrum. I had to stop her with a guillotine. I backed away silently, retreating to the kitchen. I needed to let her dig the hole a little deeper, let her sign the listing, let her commit the fraud on paper. I went up to my room, my sewing room, and sat on the bed. I looked at the rearing expenses ledger still sitting on my nightstand. You want to talk about debt? Mother, I whispered to the empty room. I pulled out the copy of the will and the stolen trust fund records. Let's talk about what you owe me. I stood in the hallway, clutching the strap of my bag until my knuckles turned white. The impulse to kick open the double doors and scream about the deed, the will, and the theft was a physical ache in my chest. It would have been satisfying. It would have been explosive, and it would have been the stupidest thing I could possibly do. Patricia held all the cards. She had my identity documents. She had the connections. If I blew up now, she would spin a narrative of a mentally unstable daughter off her meds. She would claim the documents were forgeries I had made to extort her. Without a legal strategy, I was just a girl shouting at a wall. I turned around and walked away. The old floorboards didn't creak. I had learned to walk on the edges of the steps years ago to avoid waking her. I went to my room, not to cry, but to strategize. The Leilani who begged for love was dead. The Leilani who remained was a product manager, and I was about to manage the most difficult product launch of my life, my freedom. The first step was securing air support. I couldn't afford a high-powered firm, and the public defender's office wouldn't touch a civil inheritance dispute. I opened my jewelry box. It was mostly costume jewelry, cheap trinkets I had bought for myself, but hidden in the false bottom was a small velvet pouch. Inside was a diamond tennis bracelet. It wasn't from Patricia. It was from my grandmother, given to me on my 16th birthday, 2 years before she died. She had whispered to me then, "Keep this for a rainy day." It was pouring. I took the bracelet to a pawn shop 3 towns over to avoid being recognized. The broker gave me $2,500. It was a fraction of its worth, but it was enough for a retainer. I called Marcus. We had been in the same pre-law track freshman year before I switched to business. He was young, hungry, and had just opened his own practice in a strip mall near the airport. He wasn't fancy, but he was vicious in a courtroom. I met him at a diner when I laid the copies of the will, the deed, and the trust fund withdrawals on the table. He stopped eating his burger. He read through them, his eyes widening with every page. "Leilani," he said, wiping ketchup from his lip. "This isn't just a lawsuit. This is grand larceny. This is fraud. This is embezzlement. If we play this right, she doesn't just lose the house, she goes to prison. That is the goal." I said, "But I need time. She is trying to sell the house now." "She can't sell it," Marcus said, tapping the deed. "She doesn't own it. She is selling it as the trustee, claiming she has the right to liquidate assets for the beneficiary," I explained, "and since she is the one who controls the mail and the lawyers, nobody knows I am the beneficiary who has already come of age." Marcus nodded slowly. "We need to file an injunction to stop the sale. But the moment we file, she will know. She will destroy evidence. She will hide the money she has already stolen." "Exactly," I said. "So we don't file yet. I need to get inside. I need to find where she hid the rest of the money. And I need to stop her from running before the handcuffs go on." I went home and prepared for the performance of a lifetime. I found Patricia in the living room, looking over the listing agreement. She looked up, ready to bark an order. But I dropped to my knees, literally. I knelt on the Persian rug and hung my head. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with a manufactured sob. "I am sorry." Patricia paused, her pen hovering over the paper. "Sorry for what?" "For being ungrateful." I said, "I realized you are right. You did everything for me. You sacrificed your life. And here I am, complaining about rent. It is selfish." I looked up, forcing tears into my eyes. "I want to help. I know you are stressed about the sale. I know you want to get the best price for our future. Let me help you. I am good with spreadsheets. I can organize the house maintenance records, the utility bills, everything. We can present a perfect package to the buyer so they don't negotiate the price down." Patricia stared at me for a long moment. She was looking for the crack in the facade, but she was so blinded by her own narcissism that she didn't see a liar. She saw a broken girl finally accepting her place. "It is about time you grew up," she sniffed, returning to her papers. "Very well. The records are a mess. If you want to be useful for once, organize the expense reports for the last 5 years. I want to show that this house is cheap to maintain." She gave me the password to her laptop. It was Patricia Queen 1. Of course it was. That night, I became a Trojan horse. I sat in the study, ostensibly organizing utility bills into neat folders. In reality, I was downloading her entire digital life. I found the tax returns she had filed, or rather, the ones she hadn't. She hadn't declared income in 10 years, yet her credit card statements showed spending of over $200,000 a year. That was tax evasion. Then I found the trust fund ledger. It was worse than the bank thought. She hadn't just spent the money on renovations. She had funneled money into a shell company called Starling Ventures, which was listed in Jared's name. She was laundering my inheritance to fund Jared's failed attempts at stardom. The next day at work, Sarah called me into her office. My heart stopped. Had Patricia called her Leilani? Sarah said, smiling, "You have been doing the work of a senior manager for weeks," the board noticed. "We are promoting you, effective immediately. Your salary is $110,000 a year." I almost cried. Real tears this time. It was freedom. It was power. But when I went home that night, I didn't celebrate. I walked into the kitchen with slumped shoulders. "What is wrong with you?" Jared asked. "Eating cereal directly out of the box. I got demoted." I lied, my voice flat. "Novus Tech is downsizing. They cut my pay by 30%. Patricia slammed her wine glass down. "What? That is unacceptable." How am I supposed to collect my return on investment if you are making poverty wages? I don't know. Mom, I whispered, I'm sorry. This is a disaster, she shrieked. You are useless. Good. I thought, panic. Her panic worked in my favor. She became desperate to sell the house, with my income slashed. She couldn't rely on bleeding me dry every month. She needed the lump sum from the sale. She pushed the real estate agent to expedite the listing. She became sloppy. She stopped checking on me. She assumed I was too depressed and broke to be a threat. But Jared was suspicious. He was lazy, but he possessed a feral cunning. 2 days after my demotion, I came home to find my room tossed. My mattress was overturned. My drawers were pulled out. My clothes were scattered. Jared was standing in the middle of the mess, holding my empty jewelry box. Where is the necklace? He asked. His eyes narrowed. The diamond one Grandma gave you. It's gone. I felt a spike of adrenaline. I pawned it. I said, keeping my face impassive. Why to pay the rent? Jared. Mom raised it to $4,000. Remember? And I took a pay cut. I had to sell it to keep a roof over my head. He stared at me, chewing on his thumbnail. You are too calm. Lay, you usually cry when I touch your stuff. Why aren't you crying? Because I am empty. Jared, I said, walking past him to pick up a pillow. You guys took everything. There is nothing left to cry about. He watched me for a second longer, then snorted. Whatever. You are weird. He left, but I knew I had to be careful. He sensed a shift in the atmosphere. That weekend, I escalated the war. I bought 3 tiny motion-activated cameras disguised as USB chargers. I plugged one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and one in Patricia's office. I spent my nights with headphones on, listening to the feed. It was agonizing. I had to listen to them mock me. She is so pathetic. Patricia said on the recording from Tuesday night, she actually thinks we are going to let her live in the new condo with us. Right? Jared laughed. The condo is 2 bedrooms, one for you, one for me. Where is she going to sleep? The bathtub. Patricia chuckled. Once the house is sold and the money is in your crypto account. We are going to ghost her. I will leave a note saying we moved to Europe. By the time she figures it out, we will be in a penthouse in Miami. Hearing it confirmed was different from suspecting it. It was a cold knife in the gut. They weren't just exploiting me. They were planning to abandon me with nothing. I saved the clip. Evidence of conspiracy. The closest call came on a Wednesday. I was in Patricia's office, transferring a massive folder of scanned bank statements from her desktop to my external hard drive. The progress bar was crawling, 90%, 95%. Suddenly, the doorknob turned. I didn't have time to pull the drive. I minimized the window just as Patricia walked in. She was wearing a bathrobe and a clay face mask. What are you doing? She snapped, her eyes darting to the computer screen. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was installing an antivirus. I stammered. The computer was running slow when I was organizing the utility bills. I thought maybe you picked up some malware from those shopping sites. She walked over and peered at the screen. The desktop looked normal. The transfer window was hidden in the taskbar. I didn't ask you to do that, she said suspiciously. I know. I said, but if the computer crashes, we lose the house records, and then we can't show the buyers the low maintenance costs. I just wanted to make sure the sale goes smoothly. She stared at me, the green clay cracking on her forehead as she frowned. Fine, she muttered, but don't download anything that costs money. She turned and walked out. I waited 10 seconds, then exhaled a breath I had been holding for a lifetime. The transfer hit 100%. I yanked the drive. Later that night, I combed through the files I had stolen. There were thousands of documents, emails, receipts, legal drafts, and then I found it. It was in a subfolder labeled Old Legal, a PDF file named waiver_ls.pdf. I opened it. It was a document dated 3 years ago, a waiver of inheritance rights. It stated that I, Leilani Starling, voluntarily waived my claim to the Queen Anne property and the insurance trust in exchange for a one-time payment of $10,000. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a signature, Leilani Starling. It was a good forgery, but it was a forgery. I had never seen this document in my life, and certainly not 3 years ago. I zoomed in on the notary stamp. It belonged to a man named Barry Childs. I did a quick search on my phone. Barry Childs was Patricia's old friend from her country club days. He had lost his license last year for fraud. This was the smoking gun. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was a deliberate, fabricated legal document used to defraud me of millions. I printed it out. I held the paper in my hands. It felt heavy. This was the difference between a civil lawsuit and a prison sentence. The next morning, Patricia was in a good mood. "The buyers are coming back tomorrow to sign the final offer," she announced at breakfast. $2.4 million, cash. We close in 10 days. She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with greed. "You have been helpful. Leilani, when the money comes through, maybe I will give you a little bonus, enough to buy yourself a decent suit." She was throwing crumbs at the dog she planned to euthanize. I smiled, a real smile this time, because I knew something she didn't. "Thank you." "Mom," I said, "that would be lovely." I went to work, but I didn't go to my desk. I went to the legal department to borrow their high-capacity scanner. I scanned the forgery. I scanned the video clips of them planning to abandon me. I scanned the tax evasion records. I compiled everything into a digital dossier. I sent it to Marcus. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I got it. Marcus said, his voice was tight with excitement, "Leilani, this is it. This forgery changes everything. We don't just stop the sale. We bury her." "When do we strike?" I asked. "Tomorrow," he said. "When the buyers are there, we serve her with the injunction and the eviction notice in front of witnesses." I hung up. I looked out the window at the Seattle skyline. The clouds were breaking. I went home early. Patricia was busy packing boxes, mostly my stuff, preparing to throw it out. Jared was on the phone, bragging to his friends about his upcoming move to Miami. I walked into the kitchen. Patricia was drinking wine. "I need you to sign this," she said, sliding a paper across the counter. It was a loan application. For what I asked. "A bridge loan," she said, "just to cover moving expenses until the house money clears. I need a cosigner. My credit is a little tied up." She wanted me to go into debt to fund her escape. I picked up the pen. I looked at her. "Sure, Mom," I said. I leaned down and pretended to sign, but I didn't write my name. I wrote 2 words in cursive script, illegible enough to pass at a glance, but clear enough for me to know. Game over. I handed the paper back to her. She didn't check it. She just smiled that shark smile. "Thank you, darling. You are finally learning your place." I walked away, my heart pounding a war drum. "Enjoy the wine." "Patricia," I thought, "it is the last vintage you will ever taste. War is not just about firepower. It is about positioning. You have to lure the enemy onto the ground where you have the advantage, and then you have to make them believe that standing there was their idea." Marcus and I spent 6 hours in his office drafting the most boring, dense, and lethal document in legal history. We called it a preliminary asset valuation and occupancy affidavit. To the untrained eye, it looked like standard bank bureaucracy pages of jargon about zoning codes, square footage, and property tax assessments. But buried on page 4, in paragraph 12, subsection B, was a clause that Marcus had crafted with the precision of a diamond cutter. By signing this affidavit, the text read, "The signatory acknowledges that they currently reside at the property as a tenant at will under the guardianship structure established by the Arthur Starling Trust, and that they hold no deeded claim to the physical asset beyond their role as temporary custodian, which expired upon the beneficiary reaching the age of majority. In plain English, it meant I am a renter. I do not own this house, and I am overstaying my welcome." If Patricia signed this, she was legally admitting she knew she didn't own the house. It would destroy any defense she might conjure up about squatters' rights or implied ownership when we went to court. I brought the document home on a Tuesday evening. The house was chaotic. Jared was blasting music, and Patricia was on the phone with a moving company, getting quotes for shipping her grand piano to Miami. "Mom," I said, walking into the kitchen with a clipboard, The bank called. Patricia rolled her eyes and lowered the phone. What do they want now? They are finalizing the appraisal for the buyer. I lied smoothly. They said the current valuation is coming in at $2.2 million because the property records are outdated. But the loan officer told me that if we submit an updated occupancy affidavit proving the house has been continuously inhabited by family, they can boost the valuation to $2.6 million based on the historic preservation clause. I paused, letting the number hang in the air. $2.6 million. That was $200,000 more than the current offer. Patricia's eyes lit up. Greed is a predictable mechanism. It overrides caution every single time. 2.6, she asked. Just for signing a paper. That is what he said, I replied. Uncapping a pen. They need it faxed by 5 o'clock or we lose the higher rate. Give it to me, she demanded, snatching the clipboard. She didn't read it. She didn't even glance at the paragraphs. She flipped to the back page, saw the signature of resident line, and scrawled her name with a flourish. There, she said, handing it back. Make sure they get it, and tell them if they don't hit 2.6. I am taking my business elsewhere. I took the clipboard. My hands didn't shake. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle in my chest. You just signed your eviction notice. Mother. I went straight to my room and scanned the document, emailing it to Marcus immediately. We have the smoking gun. Marcus texted back 2 minutes later. I thought I had time. I thought I had a week before the closing date to execute the final takedown. But chaos is an accelerator, and Jared was the agent of chaos. On Thursday, the atmosphere in the house shifted from manic to funereal. I came home to find Jared sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. He looked pale, sweating through his shirt. Patricia was pacing the floor, her nails clicking against the ceramic tile like the ticking of a bomb. What happened? I asked, setting down my bag. Patricia stopped pacing and glared at me. Not that it is any of your business, but your brother has found himself in a predicament. Jared looked up, his eyes bloodshot. It was one time at the club. She said she was on the pill. My stomach turned. A girl, she is pregnant, Patricia hissed, and she is threatening to go to the tabloids. Do you know what that would do to Jared's career? He is about to launch his crypto brand. A scandal like this would ruin him. He has 300 subscribers. Mom, I said, I don't think the tabloids care. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. It matters to us. We are starlings. We do not have illegitimate children with bottle service girls. So what is the plan? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. She wants $20,000. Jared mumbled, to go away, to handle it, and sign an NDA. $20,000. We don't have $20,000, I said. You spent the last of the cash on the deposit for the Miami condo. I know we don't have it, Patricia screamed. That is why you are going to get it. Me? I pointed at myself. I have $0. Remember, you took my savings. I took a pay cut. You have a clean name, Patricia said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low register. I spoke to a private lender today, a Mr. Vargas. He is willing to loan us the money immediately. No credit check. Cash in hand tonight. A loan shark. She was talking about a loan shark, but my name is flagged because of the credit limit. She continued, So, you are going to sign for it. I stared at her. The insanity of the request was breathtaking. She wanted me to take a predatory loan from a criminal to pay hush money for her son's mistake. No, I said. The room went silent. Excuse me, Patricia whispered. I said no. I am not signing anything with a loan shark. Jared made the mess. Jared can fix it, or he can be a father, but I am not getting involved. Patricia walked over to me. Her face was an inch from mine. I could smell the wine on her breath. You will do it, she said, because if you don't, I will throw you out tonight, and I will make sure the police find drugs in your room. Do you think Novus Tech employs felons? It was a bluff, or maybe it wasn't, but it was the push I needed to accelerate the timeline. I need to think about it, I said, backing away. Give me until tomorrow. Patricia stared at me, her eyes narrowing. You have until dinner tomorrow. If the money isn't here by 7, you are finished. I went upstairs and locked my door. My hands were finally shaking. This was dangerous. This wasn't legal maneuvering anymore. This was physical danger. If I signed that loan, these people would come for me when Patricia inevitably defaulted. I needed to scorch the earth before she could plant any more seeds. I spent the rest of the night making phone calls. I called the fraud departments of every major credit card issuer: Amex, Visa, MasterCard. My name is Leilani Starling. I told the operators, I am reporting unauthorized accounts opened in my name by Patricia Starling. I am also informing you that the primary cardholder, Patricia Starling, is currently insolvent and is attempting to liquidate a property she does not legally own to flee the jurisdiction. I gave them everything: the address, the real estate listing, the lawyer's contact info. By morning, Patricia's credit would be frozen solid. The walls were closing in. Next, I started the evacuation. I couldn't move out openly without triggering her suspicion, so I had to be creative. I grabbed a pile of large trash bags. I filled them with my clothes, my shoes, my books, anything that mattered. I dragged the bags downstairs. "Where are you going with those?" Jared asked from the couch. He was watching cartoons, ignoring the crisis he had created, donating to charity. I said, "Mom said I have too much clutter. I'm clearing out space for the move." He grunted and turned back to the TV. Idiot. I loaded my car. I drove 5 blocks away to a self-storage unit I had rented with cash. I unloaded everything, my life, packed into a 5x5 steel box. I went back to the house with empty bags, just in case they looked. By the time I returned, the house felt heavy. The air was thick with impending violence. Dinner was a silent affair. Patricia had ordered sushi, but nobody was eating. She sat at the head of the table, checking her watch. "It is 6:55, Leilani," she said. "Mr. Vargas is expecting a call at 7. Are you ready to be a good sister?" I looked at her. I looked at Jared, who was picking at a spicy tuna roll, unable to meet my eyes. I placed my hands on the table. "I called the bank today," I said calmly. Patricia looked up. "Which bank?" "All of them. I reported the identity theft, and I told them you are insolvent." The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of a vacuum sealing shut. "You did what Patricia whispered." I canceled the cards. "Mom, and I am not signing the loan with Mr. Vargas. I am not paying for Jared's mistake, and I am not paying your rent anymore." Patricia stood up. Her chair fell backward with a crash. Her face turned a color I had never seen before, a mottled purple rage. "You ungrateful little traitor," she shrieked. "After everything I did for you, I gave you life, and then you billed me for it." I yelled back, standing up to meet her. She lunged. It happened fast. But in my mind, it was in slow motion. Her hand raised, palm open. She struck me across the face with all the force of 20 years of resentment. Crack! My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate, hot and sharp on my cheek. I tasted blood where my tooth had cut my lip. Jared gasped, "Mom!" I stood there for a second, looking at the wall. My cheek throbbed. Tears threatened to spill, but I forced them back. I turned my head slowly to look at her. Patricia was breathing hard, her hand still raised, looking almost surprised by her own violence. I touched my cheek. I looked straight into her eyes. The camera hidden in the USB charger on the sideboard was blinking silently. A tiny red eye witnessing everything. "Remember that slap, Patricia?" I said, my voice dead calm. "It is going to be the most expensive thing you ever bought." "Get out!" she screamed, pointing at the door. "Get out of my house." I didn't argue. I didn't pack. I had already packed. I grabbed my purse. I walked to the door. "I'm leaving," I said. "But you should check your email at midnight." I walked out into the cool night air. I got into my car, drove around the corner, and parked. I sat in the dark, watching the digital clock on my dashboard. My cheek was swelling. I took a selfie of the injury, time-stamped and geotagged. Evidence of assault. The clock ticked. 11:58, 11:59, midnight. I opened my laptop. I had an email drafted and ready to go. The recipient was the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. The subject line, tax fraud and embezzlement evidence. Patricia Starling. Attached was the dossier, the unreported income, the shell company records, the trust fund theft, the fake charity deductions. I hovered my finger over the enter key. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. This was for the 12-year-old girl who lost her father and got a vampire in exchange. This was for the girl in the oversized suit being laughed at by her colleagues. This was for the slap. I pressed send. The progress bar flashed blue. Message sent. I closed the laptop. I started the engine. The house on the hill was still lit up, a beacon of golden light in the dark neighborhood. Inside, they were probably panicking about the credit cards. They had no idea that the real storm wasn't the banks. The real storm was the federal government, and I had just given them the map. The morning sun filtered through the high, stained glass windows of the entryway, casting prism-like shards of light onto the polished hardwood floor. It was a beautiful morning for an execution. I had slipped back into the house at 6 a.m, using the spare key I kept hidden in the potting shed. Neither Patricia nor Jared heard me. They were likely sleeping off the stress of the previous night, or perhaps they were dreaming of the millions they thought they were about to steal. I went straight to the guest room, the one place Patricia never checked, because she detested the wallpaper and changed. I was not wearing the mothball-scented, oversized gray suit from my first week at work. I was wearing a suit I had bought yesterday afternoon with the remainder of the pawn shop money. It was midnight blue, tailored to within an inch of its life, with a collar that stood stiff and sharp. I looked like a blade. I felt like one. 2. I waited at the top of the grand staircase, just out of sight. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I heard Patricia's voice, sugary and high-pitched, the voice she used when she was playing the role of the benevolent matriarch. "Welcome, please. Come in. We are just so excited to hand over the keys to such a lovely family." It was the buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Vance. I had seen their file on Patricia's desk. They were a nice couple from California. Tech money, looking for a historic home to raise their twins. They had no idea they were walking into a crime scene. I heard the heavy footsteps of the real estate agent, a man named Gary, who smelled of desperate commission. "I have the paperwork right here on the dining table." Gary said, "If we can just get signatures on the addendum, we can wire the funds by noon. $2.4 million. Cash." I checked my watch. 9:10. Marcus was parked down the street. The police were 2 minutes behind him. It was time. I listened to the scrape of chairs against the floor as they sat down in the dining room. "This house has been in our family for generations," Patricia was saying, her voice thick with false sentimentality. "It breaks my heart to sell it. But with the children grown, it is just too big for me." I stepped out from the shadows. My heels clicked against the oak steps. Click, click, click. The sound was deliberate, echoing through the cavernous foyer like the ticking of a countdown clock. The conversation in the dining room stopped. All heads turned toward the staircase. Patricia looked up. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. She expected the beaten-down girl in sweatpants she had slapped the night before. Instead, she saw her replacement. "Leilani," she said, a nervous laugh bubbling up in her throat. "I didn't know you were still here. Honey, why don't you go get some coffee? We are in the middle of a business meeting. I didn't stop walking." I reached the bottom of the stairs and strode into the dining room. I didn't look at her. I looked directly at Mr. Vance. "I wouldn't sign that if I were you," I said. My voice was calm, projecting clearly across the room. "Mr. Vance paused, his pen hovering over the check. "Excuse me, Leilani," Patricia snapped. Standing up, she rushed toward me, her face contorting into a mask of warning. "Go to your room immediately. We will discuss your behavior later." She reached out to grab my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. "Do not touch me," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't pull away. I just stated it as a fact. I pulled a document from my leather portfolio and slid it across the polished mahogany table, right over the real estate contract. "This is a certified copy of the deed of trust for the property located at 1412 Queen Anne Avenue North." I said to the Vances, "As you can see, The sole owner of this property is the Leilani Starling Trust. I slid a second document next to it, and this is a copy of the last will and testament of Eleanor Starling, confirming that upon my 21st birthday, which was over a year ago, the title transferred fully to me. I looked at Gary, the real estate agent. He was sweating. You listed a property without verifying the chain of title. Gary, that is negligence. I imagine the licensing board will be very interested to hear about this. Patricia made a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. She is lying, she shrieked, turning to the buyers. She is mentally unstable. She is off her medication. I am her guardian. I have power of attorney. You don't, I said. I placed a third document on the table. This is a court-certified revocation of all guardianship powers, effective as of this morning, and this is an affidavit from the bank confirming that Patricia Starling is merely a tenant who is currently attempting to sell her landlord's house. Mr. Vance picked up the deed. He read it. He looked at the date. He looked at the name. Then he looked at Patricia. You told us you were the sole owner, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. She is my daughter. It is the same thing. Patricia was frantic now, her hands fluttering in the air. It is fraud, Mrs. Vance said, standing up and grabbing her purse. Come on, honey, we are leaving. Wait, Patricia cried, chasing after them. We can lower the price. 2 million, 1.8. Mr. Vance stopped at the door. He turned back, his face red with anger. If you contact us again, my lawyer will contact you. The front door slammed shut. The echo vibrated through the house. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the dust of a collapsed empire. Patricia turned slowly to face me. The charm was gone. The mask was gone. There was only the predator, cornered and starving. You little bitch, she whispered. She lunged. This wasn't a slap. This was an attack. She came at me with claws out, screaming, aiming for my eyes. She wanted to erase me. She wanted to tear down the mirror that was showing her exactly who she was. I didn't flinch. I didn't have to. Before she could reach me, the front door opened again. Marcus stepped in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. That is enough, Marcus shouted. Patricia froze, her hands inches from my face. She looked at the police, then back at me, panting heavily. Officers, arrest her, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. She is trespassing. She is assaulting me. Actually, Officer Davis said, stepping forward, we are here for you, Mrs. Starling. He handed her a piece of paper. This is a temporary restraining order granted by the King County Superior Court, citing the domestic assault that occurred yesterday evening. We have video evidence of you striking Miss Starling. You are to maintain a distance of 500 feet from her at all times. Patricia stared at the paper, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But this is my house, she stammered. You can't restrain me from my own house. That brings us to the second matter, Marcus said, stepping forward. He adjusted his glasses and handed the officer the eviction notice we had drafted. Since Miss Starling is the legal owner of the property, and since you have no lease agreement and have engaged in violence against the homeowner, this constitutes an immediate eviction for cause. Patricia looked at Jared, who had just wandered down the stairs in his boxers, holding a bowl of cereal, looking completely bewildered. Mom, Jared asked, milk dripping from his spoon? Why are the cops here? Did the Vances buy the house? The money is gone. Jared, I said, not looking away from Patricia, there is no sale. There is no Miami penthouse. There is no crypto investment. Jared dropped the bowl. It shattered on the floor, milk and ceramics splashing onto his bare feet. What he squeaked. But I ordered the mining rigs. I put them on credit. Patricia was shaking now. Her hands were fists at her sides. You can't do this, she hissed at me. I have rights. I have squatter's rights. I have lived here for 20 years. You have lived here as a guest. I corrected her. And guests can be asked to leave, especially when they steal the silverware. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a thick, spiral-bound document. I had spent all night at the print shop making it. It had a clear plastic cover, just like the one she had given me on graduation day. The title read, Retroactive Rent and Asset Recovery Schedule. Debtor Patricia Starling. I walked over and placed it in her hands. She took it automatically, too stunned to resist. "What is this?" she whispered. "Open it," I said. She flipped the cover. Rent. I narrated. $4,000 a month for the master suite, calculated for the last 20 years, plus utilities, plus the unauthorized withdrawals from the Arthur Starling Trust, plus the credit card debt you accrued in my name, plus interest, compounded daily at the same rate you quoted me. I leaned in close. The total is $1,542,310.50. Patricia stared at the number. Her face went gray. "I don't have this kind of money," she stammered. "I know." I said, "I checked your accounts. You are insolvent, which means I will be placing a lien on your car, your jewelry, and whatever designer clothes you managed to smuggle out of here." Officer Davis cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, but he had a job to do. "Mrs. Starling, you have 30 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises. If you are still here at 10:15, we will have to arrest you for trespassing and violation of a court order." 30 minutes, Patricia shrieked. 30 minutes. I have a grand piano. I have antiques. Those are fixtures of the house, I said coldly. They stay. You can take your clothes and your toiletries. Anything bought with money from the trust stays. Jared ran to her, grabbing her arm. "Mom, do something. Tell them to get out. Where are we going to go?" Patricia looked at her son. For the first time, I saw her look at him not with adoration, but with panic. He was no longer her golden boy. He was dead weight. "We can go to a hotel," she muttered. "With what money?" I asked. "I froze your cards, remember? And I reported the fraud to the banks. You won't be able to open a checking account in this state for a decade." Jared turned to me. His face crumpled. He looked like a child again. The little brother I used to protect before he became a monster. "Lay, please," he whined. "You can't do this. I'm your brother. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was stealing from you. Just let me stay. I can stream from the guest room. I won't make noise." I looked at him. I remembered the smirk on his face when he showed off the BMW. I remembered him laughing when I wore the mothball suit. "You are 20 years old." "Jared," I said, "you are an adult. Figure it out." I turned my back on them. "Officer, please ensure they don't damage the property on their way out." I walked toward the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. Behind me, Patricia let out a primal scream. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of entitlement being ripped away from the bone. "I am your mother," she howled. "I gave you life. You cannot throw me out on the street. I own you." I stopped. My hand hovered over the faucet. The words hung in the air, vibrating with 20 years of manipulation. I turned around slowly. The police officers were flanking her, guiding her toward the stairs. She was fighting them, kicking and screaming like a toddler. I walked back until I was standing right in front of her. I looked her up and down, from her manicured roots to her designer shoes that she had bought with my college fund. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it silenced the room. "You are not a mother. A mother protects her child. A mother prepares her child for the world. You just fed off me." I stepped closer. "You are just the worst tenant I have ever had. And the lease is terminated." I nodded to the officers. "Get them out." I stood in the hallway and watched. I watched as they ran upstairs. I heard the frantic zipping of suitcases. I heard Jared crying about his gaming PC. I heard Patricia cursing my name to the heavens. 29 minutes later, they came down. They were dragging 4 suitcases between them. Patricia was wearing a fur coat over her pajamas, looking like a deposed queen fleeing a revolution. Jared was carrying his Xbox, leaving his clothes behind. They walked to the door. Patricia stopped on the threshold. She looked back at the house, my house, one last time. Then she looked at me. There was no remorse in her eyes, only hatred. "This isn't over. Leilani," she spat. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in weeks. "You are right," I said. "The IRS audit hasn't even started yet. I slammed the heavy oak door in her face. I heard the lock click into place. A deadbolt. A barrier. Silence descended on the house. Real silence. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of oppression, but the spacious, airy silence of freedom. I walked into the living room. I sat down on the sofa where they had plotted to abandon me. I put my feet up on the coffee table. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of lemon polish and victory. I was alone, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't lonely, I was free. The silence in the house was not empty. It was heavy with the ghost of a 20-year occupation. For the first 2 days after the eviction, I walked the halls like a specter, touching the walls, reclaiming the space inch by inch. I hired a locksmith within the hour of their departure. He was a burly man with a kind face who changed every tumbler, every deadbolt, and every window latch. When he handed me the new set of keys, heavy, brass, and exclusively mine, I felt a physical weight lift from my shoulders. But while my fortress was secure, the war outside was just beginning to turn nuclear. I learned later that Patricia and Jared had not gone far. They had checked into the Starlight Motor Inn, a dilapidated establishment on Aurora Avenue, known less for its hospitality and more for its hourly rates and flickering neon sign. It was the only place that would take cash up front without a credit check, which was fortunate for them, because the financial noose I had tightened was strangling them faster than I had anticipated. The collapse began, as most modern tragedies do, on social media. On the third morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from a friend I hadn't spoken to since high school. It was a link to a Facebook Live video. I clicked it. The video was shaky, filmed in a dim room with beige peeling wallpaper. Patricia was sitting on the edge of a bed that looked like it had seen better decades. She was wearing her fur coat, but her hair was unwashed, and her mascara was smeared. She looked like a caricature of a fallen aristocrat. I am a victim of elder abuse. Patricia sobbed into the camera, holding a tissue to her dry eyes. My own daughter. I raised her. I sacrificed everything, and she threw me out. She falsified documents. She bribed the police. I am sleeping in a motel with my son, because we have nowhere to go. Please, if anyone knows a good lawyer who will fight for a mother's rights, help us. The comments section was initially sympathetic. The Queen Anne community, the Bridge Club ladies, the charity gala organizers, they were all clutching their pearls. How terrible, they wrote. Kids these days are monsters. Stay strong. Patricia. I watched the video twice. I didn't feel anger. I felt the cold precision of a surgeon about to excise a tumor. I opened my laptop. I had prepared for this. I had a folder named The Truth. I didn't post it under my own name. I didn't need the attention. I created an anonymous account on the Neighborhood Nextdoor page and the local community subreddit. I uploaded a single post titled, The Reality Behind the Sob Story. It contained 3 things. First, the redacted bank statements showing the withdrawals from the Arthur Starling Trust money meant for education spent on spas, luxury cars, and cryptocurrency. Second, the forged waiver of inheritance with the fake notary stamp. And third, the video from the USB charger. The audio was crisp. I gave you life, she screamed. And then you billed me for it, I yelled back. And then, the sickening crack of her hand across my face. I hit post. The reaction was instantaneous. The internet does not forgive child abuse, and it certainly does not forgive theft. The thread exploded. Within an hour, it had 2,000 shares. The pearl-clutching comments on Patricia's video vanished, replaced by a tsunami of vitriol. You stole her inheritance. That slap was assault. You belong in jail. I always knew she was fake. Who charges their kid rent by noon? Patricia had deleted her Facebook account. Her phone number, which I knew she hadn't changed, would be blowing up with hateful texts instead of offers for legal aid. The rich friends she relied on, the ones who cared more about reputation than friendship, ghosted her immediately. Nobody wanted to be associated with a woman who embezzled from her own child. She was radioactive, but the financial pressure was doing more than just ruining her reputation. It was turning the motel room into a pressure cooker. Jared was the weak link. He always had been, without his gaming PC, without his allowance, and without the promise of the crypto windfall. He was going through withdrawal from his own delusions of grandeur. I received the details of their implosion from a police report filed 2 days later. Apparently, the loan shark Patricia had tried to force me to borrow from was not the patient type. He had found out about the house sale falling through. He wanted the $20,000 Jared owed for the paternity problem, and he wanted it yesterday. Jared, terrified and desperate, had waited until Patricia was in the shower. He rifled through her purse. He found the velvet pouch containing her last assets, a few pieces of jewelry she had managed to smuggle out, including her diamond engagement ring. He tried to run. Patricia caught him at the door. The police report described a domestic altercation involving mutual combatants, mother and son, fighting over a ring in a cheap motel room while the neighbors banged on the walls. Jared had shoved her. She had scratched his face. By the time the police arrived, Jared had fled with the ring, leaving Patricia bruised and screaming about how she had given birth to a viper. She was alone. No money, no son, no friends. And that was when she made her fatal error. She decided that I was still the answer. She decided that if she could just bully me one last time, she could make it all go away. I was at work at Novus Tech. It was a Tuesday. I was leading a meeting about the Q3 product roadmap. I was wearing my new midnight blue suit, and for the first time, my colleagues were listening to me not as the girl in the weird clothes, but as Leilani, the rising star. Suddenly, the glass doors of the conference room rattled. I looked up, standing in the lobby, arguing with the receptionist. Was Patricia? She looked deranged. She was still wearing the fur coat, but it was matted now. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her face was pale, her eyes wild. "I need to see my daughter," she screamed, her voice penetrating the soundproof glass. "She works here, Leilani Starling. Tell her to come out, my boss." Sarah looked at me, alarmed. "Leilani, is that—" "Yes," I said, standing up. I didn't feel fear. I felt a profound sense of pity mixed with disgust. "It is— excuse me for a moment." I walked out of the conference room. I didn't go to her. I stood on the other side of the security turnstiles, safe in my territory. Patricia saw me. She rushed the gate, slamming her hands against the metal bar. "Leilani," she yelled, "you have to fix this. Jared stole my ring. The IRS froze the joint account. I can't even buy food. You have to withdraw the lawsuit. You have to give me cash." The entire lobby had gone silent. People were watching from the upper balconies. The security guards, whom I had briefed on my first day back about a potential hostile visitor, were already moving in. "Mrs. Starling," the lead guard said, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You are trespassing. Get off me!" Patricia shrieked. Swatting at him, she looked at me, her eyes pleading and hateful all at once. "Leilani, tell them I am your mother. You owe me. I have the ledger. You owe me $200,000. I walked up to the turnstile. I looked her in the eye. "I don't owe you anything." "Patricia," I said, my voice calm and carrying through the silent lobby. "But since you brought up the ledger, I suggest you save your receipts. You are going to need them for the audit." "You ungrateful little—" She lunged again. But the guards had her. They each took an arm, as they dragged her backward toward the revolving doors. She kicked and screamed, her fur coat slipping off one shoulder to reveal a stained t-shirt underneath. It was the death of an image, the elegant, sophisticated Patricia Starling, the woman who judged waiters and checked stock prices at graduations, was being hauled out of a tech campus like a drunken disorderly. I watched until the doors spun shut behind her. I turned back to the lobby. My colleagues were staring. Brad, the guy who had mocked my suit, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Sarah walked up to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I straightened my jacket. I looked at the spot where Patricia had stood. "I am fine," I said. "Actually, I am better than fine. Shall we get back to the roadmap?" That afternoon, I met Marcus at the courthouse. We filed the civil suit. Leilani Starling versus Patricia Starling. The claim was for $1,800,000, covering the trust fund principal, the accrued interest, and punitive damages for fraud. It was a kill shot. Even if she sold her jewelry, even if she begged on the street, she would never pay it. The judgment would hang over her for the rest of her life. She would never own a home again. She would never have a credit card again. She would die in debt to the daughter she tried to enslave. But the universe, it seemed, had one more gift for me. I was driving home to my home when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, I sent those to voicemail, thinking it might be a reporter or a creditor looking for Jared. But something told me to answer. "Hello, Miss Starling." The voice was male, shaky, and sounded like it was coming from inside a closet. "Yes. Who is this? My name is Arnold Prentice. You don't know me, but I was your mother's accountant for the last 15 years. I pulled the car over to the side of the road. My heart skipped a beat. This was the man who had helped her cook the books, the man whose signature was on the fake tax returns. "I know who you are. Mr. Prentice," I said coldly. "My lawyer is very eager to speak with you. You are named as a co-conspirator in the IRS file I submitted." "I know," he rushed to say, panic vibrating in his voice. "That is why I'm calling. I saw the news. I saw the leak. I didn't know she was stealing from a trust fund. She told me it was her money. She told me you were mentally incapacitated and she had to manage it for you, but it didn't matter. What do you want?" "Mr. Prentice, I want a deal," he said. "The IRS agents were at my office this morning. They took my hard drives. I can't go to prison. Miss Starling, I have a family. Then you should have thought about that before you helped her evade taxes for a decade. I can give you more," he pleaded. "I have the files she told me to delete. I have the emails where she explicitly talks about hiding the assets. I have the proof that she forged your signature on the loan applications 3 years ago. I can prove intent. I gripped the steering wheel. Intent. That was the magic word. Intent was the difference between a mistake and a felony. Intent was the difference between probation and prison time. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. "Because she called me an hour ago," he said. "She tried to blame it all on me. She told me she was going to tell the feds that I embezzled the money and she was the victim. She is trying to throw me under the bus to save herself." I almost laughed. Of course she was. Patricia didn't have allies. She had human shields. "Mr. Prentice," I said, a smile creeping onto my face, "I think you should call my lawyer immediately. His name is Marcus, and if you hand over those emails, I might be inclined to tell the prosecutor that you were a manipulated victim, just like me." "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you." I hung up. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the rain start to drizzle on the windshield. It was a classic Seattle evening, gray and wet, but inside the car, it felt warm. The circle was complete. She had lost her home. She had lost her son. She had lost her reputation. And now, her last ally had just defected to the winning side. I put the car in drive and headed up the hill toward Queen Anne. I had a lot of work to do. I had booked a contractor to come the next day. We were going to tear out the carpets. We were going to repaint the walls. I was going to turn Patricia's office into a library. I was going to scrub the stain of her existence from the floorboards. And thanks to Arnold Prentice, the legal system was going to scrub her from society. Desperation has a specific smell. It smells like stale coffee, cheap polyester, and the ozone tang of fear. The small mediation room at the King County Courthouse reeked of it. Patricia sat across the table from me, a specter of her former self. She had sold her last remaining asset, a vintage Jaguar that had been gathering dust in a storage unit, to hire the man sitting next to her, Mr. Henderson, not the kind, grandfatherly lawyer from my company, but a sweaty, disheveled man with a stained tie and a reputation for ambulance chasing. Patricia was putting on a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She was slumped in her chair, wrapped in a tattered shawl, coughing theatrically into a handkerchief every few minutes. "My client is a frail, elderly woman," Mr. Henderson wheezed. shuffling papers that looked like they had been retrieved from a recycling bin. She suffers from chronic fatigue, arthritis, and heart palpitations. For her own daughter to evict her onto the street is not just a breach of contract. It is elder abuse under Washington state law. We are countersuing for emotional distress and demanding immediate reinstatement of her residency, plus a monthly stipend for her care. I sat perfectly still. Beside me, Marcus looked bored. He had seen the evidence. He knew this was a farce. Elder abuse, Marcus asked, arching an eyebrow. Your client is 55 years old. She is in fragile health. Henderson slammed his hand on the table. She requires constant care. I reached into my folder. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the theatrics, I have here the billing records from the Serenity Medical Spa in Bellevue. Dated 3 weeks ago. I slid the paper across the table. Botox injections, a chemical peel, and a deep tissue massage. The notes from the esthetician describe the client as vibrant, energetic, and having excellent skin elasticity. I pulled out another paper, and this is a receipt from a personal trainer she hired last month. She was deadlifting 100 pounds. That doesn't sound like a frail, bedridden invalid to me. It sounds like someone who is perfectly capable of getting a job. Patricia stopped coughing. She glared at the papers, her face flushing red. This is an invasion of privacy, she hissed, dropping the frail act instantly. How did you get these? You paid for them with the credit card you opened in my name. I said, I am the account holder. I have access to every transaction. You spent $3,000 on your face while I was eating instant ramen to pay your rent. The mediator, a tired-looking woman who had clearly seen enough family drama for one lifetime, looked at the receipts and then at Patricia. Mrs. Starling, she said dryly. The evidence suggests you are physically capable. The claim of medical dependency is dismissed. Do you have any actual legal grounds for this suit? Patricia stood up. Trembling with rage, she leaned over the table. I am her mother. Doesn't that mean anything? I gave her life, and you have spent 20 years billing her for it. The mediator cut in. We are done here. The eviction stands. The restraining order stands. Good day. Patricia stormed out, her shawl trailing behind her like a broken wing. Mr. Henderson gathered his papers, mumbled an apology to Marcus, and scurried after her. I didn't feel triumph. I felt exhausted. It was like fighting a hydra. Every time I cut off one lie, 2 more grew in its place. But the hydra had another head. Jared. 2 nights later. The storm hit Seattle. Rain lashed against the windows of the Queen Anne house, turning the garden into a mud pit. I was in the library, formerly Patricia's office, reading a book, trying to reclaim the peace of the house. Suddenly, my phone chirped. A notification from the new security system I had installed. Motion detected backyard. Zone 4. I opened the app. The night vision camera showed a figure in a dark hoodie stumbling through the rose bushes. He was holding something metallic, a crowbar. It was Jared. He looked thinner, haggard, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He reached the back door and jammed the crowbar into the frame. I didn't scream. I didn't go down there to confront him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing my fear. I pressed the panic button on the app. The silent alarm triggered immediately at the precinct. I watched on the screen as he pried at the door. He was crying, muttering to himself. Just need the Xbox, he was saying. Just need the setup. Then I can stream. Then I can get money. He was pathetic. A 20-year-old man breaking into his sister's house to steal a gaming console because he had no life skills, no job, and no mother to enable him anymore. 3 minutes later, the blue lights flashed in the driveway. Jared froze. He looked toward the side gate, but it was too late. 2 officers swarmed the backyard. Drop the weapon, one shouted. Jared dropped the crowbar. He put his hands up, sobbing loudly. It's my house, he wailed. I live here. My mom owns it. I watched as they handcuffed him. They patted him down. The officer pulled a small plastic baggie from his pocket. White powder, trespassing, possession of burglary tools, and possession of a controlled substance. The camera feed showed them dragging him to the cruiser. He looked up at the house, at the library window where I was sitting. Lay, Help me lay. I closed the blinds. The next morning, the phone calls started, not from Jared, but from the jail, and then, inevitably, from Patricia. She called from a burner number. I let it go to voicemail. "Leilani, please," she sobbed on the recording. "They set bail at $5,000. He is a baby. He can't survive there. He has asthma. Please, I know you have money. Just help him this once." I didn't call back, but I knew what she would do. She had the $5,000. It was the last of the money she had gotten from selling the Jaguar. The money meant to pay Mr. Henderson for the next round of lawsuits. She bailed him out. I found out from Marcus later. She walked into the bail bondsman's office and slapped down a stack of wrinkled bills. It was every cent she had left in the world. She chose the golden boy one last time. Now, they were both on the street, penniless, with a criminal trial looming for Jared and a fraud investigation closing in on Patricia. The house finally fell silent. No more lawsuits, no more break-ins, just the rain and the hum of the refrigerator. I started to settle in. I hired a painter to cover the beige walls with warm colors. Terracotta, sage green. I bought furniture that I liked, modern and comfortable, replacing the stiff Victorian antiques Patricia had cherished. I was building a home inside the shell of my trauma, but the past has a way of reaching out, even when you think you have cut the cord. On Sunday, my phone rang. It was Aunt Carol, my father's sister. She lived in Ohio and hadn't visited in 10 years. Patricia had always told me Carol hated us, that she was jealous of our success. "Leilani," Carol's voice was sharp. "I just heard from your mother. She called me from a payphone. She is homeless. Is this true?" "Yes, Aunt Carol. It is. How could you?" she demanded. "I know Patricia can be difficult, but to throw your own mother onto the street? It is cruel, Leilani. It is heartless. Your father would be ashamed of you." That stung. The mention of my father always did. "She stole from me, Aunt Carol," I said quietly. "She stole my inheritance. She stole my identity." "Oh, stop it," Carol scoffed. "That is just money. Family is family. You have a big house. You have a good job. You can afford to let her stay in a guest room. You are being petty." I took a deep breath. I realized then that Carol didn't know. Patricia had spun her a web of lies, just like she had done to everyone else. "Aunt Carol, do you remember the college fund you set up for me when I was born, the $5,000 you sent?" "Of course." She said, "Did you know Patricia cashed it out 10 years ago and spent it on a trip to Cabo Silence? And do you remember the loan you gave her in 2015, the $10,000 for the roof repair?" "Yes, she paid me back." Eventually, I opened my laptop. I had the files from Arnold Prentice. "Check your email." "Aunt Carol, I just sent you a file." I waited. I heard the click of a mouse on the other end. "That is a bank statement," I explained. "Look at the date of your loan." And look at the withdrawal the next day. It didn't go to a roofer. It went to Prestige Jewelers. "She bought a diamond necklace with your money." "Carol, she never fixed the roof." I heard a gasp, then a long, heavy silence. "She told me the roof was leaking into your bedroom. She said you were getting sick from the mold." "She lied." I said, "She used me as a prop to get money from you, just like she used me to get money from Dad's insurance, just like she is using you now to guilt-trip me." Carol didn't say anything for a long time. Then, her voice came back. Smaller, shakier. "I didn't know." "I know." I said, "Neither did I, until I found the receipts." She hung up without saying goodbye, but I knew she wouldn't be sending Patricia any money. 2 days later, the final act of desperation played out on my front porch. I was in the kitchen making tea when the doorbell camera chimed. I looked at the monitor on the fridge. It was Patricia. She looked broken. Her hair was gray, the dye had grown out. Her coat was gone, replaced by a cheap windbreaker. She stood on the welcome mat, shivering in the rain. She didn't ring the doorbell again. She just knelt, right there on the concrete. She dropped to her knees. She looked up at the camera, knowing I was watching. "Leilani," she sobbed, her voice tinny through the speaker. "Please, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I have nowhere to go. Jared left me. He took the bail money and ran. I am alone. I am hungry. Please, open the door. I will do anything. I will be the maid. I will sleep in the basement. Just don't leave me out here. I stared at the screen. I saw the woman who had terrorized me for 20 years reduced to a beggar. Part of me, the part that still wanted a mother, ached to open the door. It would be so easy. I could be the savior. I could be the benevolent queen. But then I remembered the ledger. Interest starts at 8 a.m. I remembered the mothball suit. I remembered the slap. I remembered her selling my house to fund a crypto scam. If I opened that door, I wasn't saving her. I was inviting the infection back in. She wouldn't be grateful. She would wait. She would recover. And then she would strike again. That was her nature. I pressed the intercom button. Go to a shelter. Patricia, I said. There is one on 3rd Avenue. They take walk-ins. Leilani. No. Please, I'm your mother. You are a tenant who was evicted for cause. I said, goodbye. I turned off the monitor. I went back to my tea. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was iron. I thought that was the end. I thought I had weathered the final storm. But the next day, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Patricia. It wasn't from Jared. It wasn't from the court. It was a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a promissory note, a loan agreement for $200,000. The lender was not a bank. The lender was an entity called Vargas Holdings, LLC. The interest rate was 50%, and at the bottom was a signature, Leilani Starling. It wasn't my signature, but it was a damn good forgery, better than the others. I felt a cold dread wash over me. Patricia hadn't just tried to borrow $20,000 for Jared's paternity suit. She had already borrowed $200,000 months ago, using my identity, from the loan shark she had threatened me with, and now that she had defaulted. Now that she was on the street and penniless Mr. Vargas wasn't looking for Patricia anymore. He was looking for the name on the contract. He was looking for me. My phone rang. Unknown number. I picked it up, my heart hammering. Miss Starling, a deep, gravelly voice said, "This is Mr. Vargas. We need to talk about your mother's debt. Or should I say your debt?" I looked out the window. A black sedan was parked across the street. The window rolled down, and a man in sunglasses looked up at the house. The war wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields. And this time, I wasn't fighting a narcissist in court. I was fighting a shark in open water. The black sedan across the street was not just a car. It was a shark tank on wheels. And I was standing on the edge of the pier. The phone in my hand felt heavy. The voice of Mr. Vargas still echoing in my ear like gravel crunching under tires. Most people would have locked the doors, called 911, and hidden in the bathtub. But I knew that men like Vargas did not respect locks. And the police response time in Seattle was 7 minutes, plenty of time for a shark to tear a life apart. Besides, fear was Patricia's currency. I dealt in facts. I hung up the phone. I grabbed the file folder I had prepared, the one containing the forensic handwriting analysis of the forged loan application and the GPS location of Patricia's burner phone. I walked out the front door. I marched straight across the street to the black sedan. The window rolled down further. Mr. Vargas was sitting in the back. He wore a suit that cost more than my car, and sunglasses that hid eyes I assumed were dead. 2 men sat in the front, necks thick as tree trunks. "Miss Starling," Vargas said, his voice smooth. "You are bold. I like that. But boldness does not pay the $200,000 you owe me. I don't owe you a cent." "Mr. Vargas," I said, keeping my voice steady. I held up the file. "This is a forensic document analysis from a certified graphologist. It proves that the signature on your promissory note is a forgery. The loop on the L is wrong. The pressure points are off. It was signed by Patricia Starling, who has a history of identity theft which is currently being investigated by the FBI and the IRS. Vargas didn't look at the file. He looked at me. "I don't care who signed it," he said. "I care about who pays for it. Your mother is a ghost. You are here. You have a house. You have a job. You are the path of least resistance. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. I am not the path of least resistance. Mr. Vargas, I am a dead end. If you touch me, or my property, the federal investigation already targeting my mother will expand to include your organization. I have already sent a copy of this forgery to the district attorney. His jaw tightened. The air in the car grew heavy. However, I continued, leaning closer to the window, I believe in the principle that every debt has a debtor. You want your money. You want the person who stole from you. I slid a piece of paper through the window. It had an address on it. This is the homeless shelter on 3rd Avenue, bed number 42. She checks in every night at 6 o'clock. She still has the diamond earrings she didn't declare to the police. They are worth at least $10,000. It is not $200,000, but it is a start. And she is the one who signed your paper. Vargas took the paper. He looked at it, then at me. You are selling out your own mother, he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. She sold me out first. I said, it is just business. Vargas laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. Drive, he told his driver. The sedan peeled away, heading toward downtown. As soon as they turned the corner, my knees buckled. I grabbed the mailbox to steady myself. I took a deep breath, inhaling the damp Seattle air. I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved. Detective Davis, I said when he answered. This is Leilani Starling. I have information regarding the location of a known loan shark, Marco Vargas. He is currently en route to the 3rd Avenue shelter to confront a witness in your fraud investigation. Patricia Starling, if you hurry, you can catch them both. I hung up. I didn't want Vargas to hurt her. I wanted him to terrify her. And then, I wanted the police to take them both off the board forever. I drove to the shelter myself. Parking 2 blocks away, I needed to see it. I needed to witness the end. I sat in my car, watching the entrance. At 6:15, the black sedan pulled up. Vargas and his 2 men got out. They didn't look like they were there to donate soup. They marched into the shelter. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Patricia. I stared at the screen. The caller ID said, unknown. I knew it was her. This was the moment, the final plea. I slid my thumb across the screen. Hello, Leilani. Help me. The voice was a shriek of pure, unadulterated terror. They are here. That man Vargas. He found me. He says he is going to break my legs if I don't give him the money. I could hear shouting in the background. I could hear the sound of a struggle. Leilani, please, tell him you will pay. Tell him you are coming. I am your mother. They are going to kill me. I looked at the shelter entrance. I saw the flashing lights of police cruisers turning the corner. Silent but rapid. The trap was sprung. Patricia, I said, my voice calm and detached. Do you remember what you told me when I asked for money to buy a suit for work? What, Leilani? Are you crazy? He has a gun. You told me that struggle builds character. I continued. You told me that I needed to learn the value of $1. You borrowed $200,000. Patricia, you spent it. Now the bill has come due. Leilani, this is the most practical lesson in personal responsibility you will ever receive. I said, but goodbye, Mother. I hung up. At that exact moment, the police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of the shelter. SWAT officers poured out. Weapons drawn, they stormed the building. I watched from my car as the chaos unfolded. 10 minutes later, the doors opened. First came Vargas, handcuffed, looking furious. Then came Patricia. She was not walking with the dignity of the Queen Anne matriarch. She was being dragged. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. She was wearing a stained tracksuit. She was screaming, thrashing, looking wildly around the street for a savior who wasn't there. They shoved her into the back of a squad car. It was over. The fallout was swift and brutal. At the station, faced with the loan shark charges and the mountain of evidence I had provided to the IRS, Patricia broke. She didn't just confess. She vomited the truth. She admitted to the trust fund embezzlement. She admitted to the identity theft. She admitted to the forged waiver. She tried to frame it as a desperate attempt to maintain the family's status. But the detectives weren't buying it. She was charged with 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of filing false tax returns. She was looking at 15 years in federal prison. But the sweetest victory wasn't the criminal charges. It was the civil suit. I stood in the courtroom 3 weeks later. Patricia was there, wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking 20 years older than her actual age. She wouldn't look at me. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for family drama, read the verdict. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Leilani Starling, the defendant, Patricia Starling, is ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1,800,000. Furthermore, the court issues a permanent restraining order. I knew I would never see that money. Patricia was bankrupt, but the judgment was a piece of paper that said, "To the world and to history." She was wrong, and I was right. It was my vindication. As I walked out of the courthouse, I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the bus stop. It was Jared. He looked terrible. His skin was sallow, his designer clothes replaced by a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. It was a dishwasher's uniform from a greasy spoon diner downtown. He saw me. He stood up, looking like he wanted to approach, but stopped when he saw the way I held myself. "Hey, Lay," he mumbled, looking at his feet. "Hello? Jared, I heard about Mom. 15 years. Huh? That is the sentencing guideline. Yes, he kicked at a piece of gum on the sidewalk. I got a job, washing dishes at Sal's. It pays minimum wage. My hands are raw. Work is hard. Jared," I said, "that is why they pay you for it." He looked up at me, his eyes wet. "Can I come home? Just for a night I sleep in a hostel. It smells like urine. I just want a shower." I looked at him. I remembered the night he broke into my house with a crowbar. I remembered the years he watched Patricia bleed me dry and laughed about it, because it bought him a BMW. "No, Jared," I said, "you can't come home, because it is not your home, but I'm your brother, and that is the only reason I'm not pressing charges for the burglary." I said, "That is my gift to you, a clean record. Do not waste it." I walked away. I didn't look back. I heard him sit back down on the bench. The sound of a boy finally realizing that the world did not owe him a living. I drove back to Queen Anne. I parked in the driveway of the Victorian mansion. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the slate-gray paint. It was beautiful. It was majestic. I walked inside. The new paint colors I had chosen looked lovely. The library was quiet. The kitchen was spotless. I stood in the center of the living room. I closed my eyes. I had won. I had defeated the dragon. I had reclaimed the castle. But as I looked around, I realized something. I looked at the fireplace, and I saw Patricia standing there with a glass of wine, criticizing my posture. I looked at the stairs, and I saw myself at 12 years old, crying because she forgot my birthday. I looked at the dining table, and I saw the ghost of the ledger. This house wasn't a home. It was a crime scene. It was a mausoleum of memories I wanted to burn. I couldn't live here. Every floorboard creaked with the weight of my trauma. If I stayed, I would just be the keeper of the Museum of Misery. I picked up my phone. I dialed Gary, the real estate agent who had tried to sell the house for Patricia. He answered on the first ring, sounding terrified. "Miss Starling, please. I didn't know. Save it. Gary." I cut him off. "I have a job for you." "What is it? I want you to list the house." "List it. You mean sell it?" "Yes," I said, looking out the window at the city lights. "Sell it all. The furniture, the fixtures, the view. But where will you go? Somewhere where the walls don't whisper." I said, "Price it to move." "Gary, I want to be out by the end of the month." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the mantel where a picture of my father sat, the only photo I had salvaged from the basement box. "We are leaving. Dad," I whispered to the frame. "We are finally leaving." I turned off the lights. The house went dark. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. The darkness wasn't empty. It was a blank canvas. And I was finally holding the brush. The moving trucks had left an hour ago. their taillights fading down the steep incline of Queen Anne Avenue. The house was empty. I walked through the rooms one last time, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors. The sound was different now. It didn't echo with the heaviness of the past. It just sounded like an empty building. The terracotta and sage green paint I had applied during my brief reclamation period looked vibrant in the afternoon sun. But they were just colors on a wall. They weren't enough to cover the history of this place. I stopped in the library. The shelves where I had discovered the stolen trust fund records were bare. I stopped in the kitchen where Patricia had slapped me. I stopped in the sewing room, my room where I had received the ledger that started this war. It was just a room, 8 feet by 10 feet, small, dusty, and insignificant. It was hard to believe that so much pain had been compressed into such a tiny box. I walked to the front door. The heavy oak slab that I had slammed in my mother's face weeks ago. I stepped out onto the porch and locked it. I dropped the key into an envelope addressed to Gary, the real estate agent. He would pick it up later. The new owners, a young couple from Portland who didn't care about local gossip, were moving in on Monday. They had paid $3.2 million. I walked down the steps toward my car. The air was crisp, smelling of rain and cedar. I felt light, physically light, as if gravity had loosened its grip on me. But the universe has a sense of symmetry, and it wasn't going to let me leave without one final image to burn into my memory. She was standing on the sidewalk, near the hydrangea bushes. Patricia. She was out on bail, awaiting her federal trial. I hadn't seen her since the arraignment, and the transformation was shocking. The woman standing there was not the shark who had handed me a bill on graduation day. She was a ghost. She had aged 10 years in a month. Her hair, usually dyed a fierce, glossy blonde, was showing inch-long roots of steel gray. Her clothes were mismatched, a pair of loose sweatpants and a coat that looked like it had been bought at a thrift store. She didn't shout. She didn't lunge. She just stood there, clutching a plastic grocery bag, watching me. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, distant curiosity, like looking at a specimen behind glass. She took a step forward. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. "You sold it," she said. Her voice was raspy, stripped of its usual haughty cadence. "Yes," I said. "I closed the deal yesterday." She looked up at the house, her eyes tracing the Victorian turret, the wraparound porch, the symbol of the status she had worshipped more than her own children. "It was my home," she whispered. "It was a building." "Patricia," I corrected her, "and it was never yours." She looked back at me. Tears began to pool in her eyes. But they weren't the manipulative crocodile tears of the past. These were tears of genuine confusion. She truly didn't understand, in her twisted reality. She was the victim. She had always been the victim. Why, she asked. It was a single word, heavy with accusation. I waited. "Why could you do this to me?" she continued, her voice trembling. "I am your mother. I carried you. I birthed you. I gave you life." There it was, the ultimate trump card, the biological debt that parents like her believe can never be repaid. I looked at her. I thought about the ledger. I thought about the interest rates. I thought about the hunger, the cold, the mothball suit, and the theft of my future. I walked over to my car and opened the door. Then I turned to face her one last time. "You gave me life, Patricia," I said, my voice steady and calm. "But then you made me buy it back from you every single day. You charged me for my breath. You charged me for my space. You turned my existence into a subscription service." I got into the driver's seat. I rolled down the window. I simply stopped making the payments. I didn't wait for her response. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Patricia was standing alone on the sidewalk, a small, gray figure shrinking against the backdrop of the massive house she had lost. She looked abandoned. She looked like a child left behind at a bus stop. It was the exact image she had tried to create for me in the first chapter of this story. She had threatened to throw me out, to leave me homeless, to erase me. Now the mirror had turned. I was the one driving away. She was the one left in the cold. I turned the corner, and she was gone. I didn't cry. I turned on the radio. The music sounded better than it ever had. Halfway to downtown, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at it at a red light. It was a text from a new number. Lay, it's Jared. I know I messed up. Mom is crazy. I'm not with her anymore. I'm really hungry. Can you spot me $50? I promise I'll pay you back when I get my first check. Please, sis. I stared at the message. The old Leilani, the one who craved validation, the one who wanted to be the good sister, would have sent the money. She would have thought, he is blood. He is suffering. I have millions now. $50 is nothing. But I wasn't that Leilani anymore. I knew that sending $50 wouldn't help Jared. It would just enable him. It would tell him that there was still a safety net, that he could still manipulate me with guilt. Forgiveness is a personal journey. It does not require reconnection. You can forgive a rattlesnake for being a rattlesnake, but you do not invite it back into your bed. I tapped the screen, block caller. I put the phone down. The light turned green. I drove on. I arrived at my new building 20 minutes later. It was a sleek glass tower in the heart of downtown Seattle. It had 24-hour security, a concierge, and elevators that required a biometric scan to operate. I parked in my assigned spot number 101. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor, the penthouse. I bought it with the proceeds from the Queen Anne sale. It was everything the old house wasn't. It was open concept. It had floor-to-ceiling windows. It was modern, white, and clean. There were no dark corners. There were no basements with hidden boxes. And most importantly, there was only one name on the deed, Leilani Starling. I walked in and kicked off my shoes. I felt the cool, polished concrete under my feet. I walked to the kitchen island, where a bottle of expensive Cabernet was waiting. I poured myself a glass. I wasn't keeping all the money. I knew that money without purpose was just another form of rot. I had already met with Marcus earlier that week to establish the paperwork. We were launching the Starling Freedom Grant. It was a scholarship fund specifically designed for students who had been cut off by their parents, students who were victims of financial abuse, and young adults who needed legal aid to reclaim their stolen identities. I was going to use the money Patricia had stolen from me to help others escape people like her. It was the ultimate revenge, turning her greed into someone else's liberation. I took my wine glass and walked out onto the balcony. The wind was high up here, whipping my hair around my face. Below me, the city of Seattle was a grid of glittering lights. I could see the ferries crossing the dark water of the Sound. I could see the Space Needle, somewhere down there, in the maze of streets. Patricia was looking for a place to sleep. Somewhere down there, Jared was washing dishes. I didn't wish them harm. I just didn't wish them anything. They were characters in a book I had finished reading. My phone chimed in my pocket. A notification from my banking app. Direct deposit received Novus Tech payroll. $4,212. It wasn't millions. It was my bi-weekly salary. It was money I had earned with my own brain, my own time, and my own effort. I stared at the number. It was beautiful. It was mine. Nobody could claim it. Nobody could garnish it. Nobody could guilt me out of it. I sat down on the patio chair and pulled a small leather notebook from my pocket. It was the same notebook where, months ago, I had frantically tried to calculate how I would pay Patricia's rent. I turned to the first page. At the top, written in shaky, tear-stained ink, was the heading, Debt to Mom. Below it was the figure, $250,000. I took a pen from my pocket. I drew a thick, heavy line through the number. I scratched it out until the paper nearly tore. Underneath it, in bold, steady letters, I wrote, Freedom, paid in full. I closed the book. I took a sip of wine. The liquid was rich and warm. I looked out at the horizon, where the sun had fully set and the stars were beginning to emerge. I wasn't just a survivor of a bad mother. I was a survivor of a system that tried to tell me I owed my life to the people who damaged it. I smiled. It wasn't the manic smile of triumph. It wasn't the shark smile Patricia used to wear. It was a small, quiet curving of the lips. It was the smile of a person who sleeps soundly at night. I had graduated with honors from university, yes, but that was the easy part. Today, sitting on this balcony, holding the keys to my own life, I realized I had finally graduated from the hardest school of all. I had graduated from my family, and I didn't even have to pay the tuition. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It has been a long journey from that suffocating Victorian house to this balcony of freedom, and I am grateful you stuck with me until the end. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a busy city like Seattle, or somewhere quiet and remote? Please comment down below and share your thoughts on Patricia's fate. Did she get what she deserved? If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, please subscribe to the channel Blue Payback. Hit the like button and smash that hype button so we can share this story with more people who might need to hear that it is okay to cut toxic ties. Stay strong, and remember, you don't owe anyone your happiness.